Hello and welcome to Epicenter. No ambiguity, no noise. Let's come straight to the point. I often say, and sometimes in jest, that when someone sneezes on the banks of Dull Lake, editors in New York Times and Washington Post catch a cold. Although I say it in lighter vein, I'm not really joking. The amount of scrutiny on Jammu and Kashmir by the general global media and media all over the world is unprecedented and has been like this for the last 75 years. However, there is a huge chunk of Kashmir that is illegally occupied by Pakistan that no one seems to be interested in. There are people who live in those areas. They have aspirations too. They have dreams too. Have their aspirations and dreams been met? Do we know anything about them? What about their rights of self determination that Pakistan claims to talk about so much? The information vacuum for last 75 years has been so intense that we literally have no idea what is going on. We don't have idea. International media doesn't have idea. Indian media also does not have idea. I might try to remind you when abrogation of Article 370 happened. There was an internet clampdown for a while for the purposes of national security. That internet was not working in Kashmir for a while. If you remember the hue and cry that went on, and in fact, US, I still remember US Congress, they asked for two hearings, back to back two hearings on Kashmir issue about the internet clampdown, about the information blackout. What if I tell you that there is a part of Kashmir that has been under permanent information blackout for last 75 years? And that is why this is forgotten Kashmir. But this was only until now. Last year, a comprehensive book was published that tells us exactly what Pakistan has done to Kashmir that it illegally occupies. You can see the cover on your screen now. Forgotten Kashmir, the other side of the line of control, is an exquisite piece of scholarship. And the author of this author of this exquisite book joins us today on Epicenter, Ambassador Dinkar Srivastava, who is the author of this book. Just to give you a little background about Ambassador, he joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1978. In 1993-94, as director of UNP, he was part of successful Indian lobbying efforts against four Pakistani attempts to have resolutions on J&K adopted in UN General Assembly and UN Commission of Human Rights. He was involved in the drafting of National Human Rights Commission statute. As Joint Secretary UNP, he participated in Indian lobbying efforts to contain the diplomatic fallout of the Pokhran-2 nuclear tests and prevent the internationalization of the J&K issue during the Kargil War. He dealt with Indian candidature for permanent membership of the UN Security Council, UN peacekeeping, and the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism. He was a member of the Indian delegations to the World Conference on Human Rights in 1993 and the International Court of Justice in the case of aerial incident of 1999, Pakistan versus India. In 2011 to 2015, as India's ambassador to Iran, he negotiated the MOU for Indian participation in Chabar Port. Welcome to the Epicenter, Ambassador Srivastava.
Thank you, and thanks for a very generous introduction.
Very, very well deserved. Thank you for being here, sir. It's truly a privilege. I thought we will start from the very basic. The geography of Jammu and Kashmir is as important to understand as the history of Jammu and Kashmir, or as the politics of the region. So, before we get into the detailed discussion about your book, could you give our audience a sense of how much territory of what belonged to erstwhile princely state of Kashmir has now been occupied by Pakistan, and how much of it was ceded to China? You can see the map of Jammu and Kashmir. So if you could just give us a sense of what is going on here geographically.
Well, if you look at the map, what is the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, roughly 47% of this area has been occupied by Pakistan and China. And Pakistan has roughly 72,000 square kilometers. India has about 106,000 square kilometers, and China has another 42,000 square kilometers. Now, if you look at the map, you can see on the crest of Jammu and Kashmir, top left, that is the area which is marked as POK. This is the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Pakistan calls it Azad Kashmir. What is Azad Kashmir is actually, if you look at the map, you see a kind of lion's paw. The head is where POK is written, that is called northern area. What Pakistan calls Azad Kashmir is only the lower part, that which extends north to south, a thin sliver of territory. Now, what is the significance of this difference in terminology? The significance lies in the fact that 85% of the territory occupied by Pakistan has been hived off and absorbed in Pakistan directly. This 85% is called Northern Area, which now they have renamed as Gilgit-Baltistan. What is left as so-called Azad Kashmir or Free Kashmir is only a rump of 15%. Now, why this division of the territory by Pakistan? Obviously, they wanted to absorb the whole territory, which has been under their control. But the significance of the northern area of Gilgit-Baltistan, which is 85% of the total territory occupied by Pakistan, lies in the fact that it touches Afghanistan and Wakhan corridor. This is that yellow part on the map on top of the crest of Jammu and Kashmir.
Yeah.
And
Can we see the map again, the yellow part that ambassador is showing. Can we see the map again? Yeah. Go ahead, sir. The yellow part you were talking about.
Not yellow part. This is that thin sliver on top. Where Afghanistan is written.
Okay.
This is Wakhan corridor.
Okay.
This was artificial creation of the British in the 19th century to insulate their Indian colony from the emerging Russian Empire. So, northern area of Gilgit-Baltistan touches Afghanistan. It also touches China. Without Pakistani control of northern area, there would have been no CPEC, no China-Pakistan economic corridor, because CPEC enters Pakistan through this route.
Yeah.
Then the other and also Indus River, which carries 80% of the water of 6 rivers rise in Jammu and Kashmir. That enters Pakistan through northern area. So this was strategically most important, bordering China, Afghanistan, and the then Soviet Union, which is now Central Asia, and source of major river.
Okay, so we get a sense of who owns what in Kashmir right now, because who illegally occupies what. Because typically when we talk about Kashmir, most people just think of Kashmir Valley. Most people just do not realize how big the princely state of Kashmir was. They also don't, there are narratives, people talk about Muslim dominated state of Jammu and Kashmir, which may be right, but there are also, it is a very multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-religious region, which people sort of forget. Because Pahadis are different from, people who live in Gilgit-Baltistan, their Azad Kashmir, Mirpuris are different, so there are multiple ethnicities. We will talk all about that, because this is a fascinating, discussion. I just wanted to ask you that most people in international global fora, when I talk to them, they believe that so-called Kashmir issue exists because India refused to get the plebiscite done. This is the general narrative, a very well entrenched narrative, which we have not been able to fight. In your book, however, you clearly mentioned that it was Pakistan, not India, that rejected the plebiscite. How do you explain this extraordinary statement?
You are right, Sunanda. The general perception which is there is that India offered plebiscite and then went back on it.
Yeah.
This is completely wrong. There have been formal offers of plebiscite only on 3 occasions. The first such occasion was November 2nd, 1947, when Mountbatten went to Lahore to meet Jinnah. This was after the partition. The tribal invasion had already been launched on 20th October. The state of Jammu and Kashmir had acceded to India on 26th October. And following the accession, Indian Army had been sent to the state to aid it against the tribals the next day. Now, Mountbatten told Jinnah that your attempt to grab Kashmir, essentially it was a preemptive strike by Pakistan to grab the state before Indian Army moved in. Mountbatten explained that now the military balance has changed because the Indian Army has moved in. So Pakistan's best hope was to accept plebiscite under UN's auspices. Jinnah refused. He, of course, said that let's do it bilaterally between you and me. Mountbatten said he was constitutional head. He could not do it. But these were technical arguments. Why didn't Jinnah, who's called father of the nation by Pakistan, accept what has subsequently become and remains to date Pakistan's official position? Mountbatten was offering plebiscite under UN's auspices. Jinnah knew at that time the tribal invasion was still on, and the tribals had raped, killed, and looted Hindus, Muslims, and Christians alike. There was this well-recorded incident of rape of nuns in a convent near Srinagar.
In Baramulla.
In Baramulla. So Jinnah knew that Pakistan will lose the vote. So he turned down the first offer of plebiscite, which was made by Lord Mountbatten. This is recorded by his press attaché, Alan Campbell Johnson, in his book, Mission with Mountbatten. The second occasion arose in 1950 when UN appointed Owen Dixon as a mediator on Kashmir issue. Owen Dixon was an Australian jurist. He came to the subcontinent and he proposed regional plebiscite. His logic was a single plebiscite across the entire state will leave pockets of minorities on either side of political divide and lead to forced migration, which was actually happening had happened on a much larger scale in the rest of the subcontinent. To avoid it, he suggested regional plebiscite, and he said that there are regions where the composition of the population makes it very clear where they would go. So he narrowed the choice to the valley. In the valley, the Muslim population was 70%. Muslims were 70% of the population. Now, this offer should have been grabbed by Pakistan, because if you go by Pakistani version that Muslims wanted to join Pakistan, its advantage was most pronounced in the valley. Owen Dixon has recorded India was willing to accept the proposal. Pakistan turned it down. And what was Pakistan's reason? Owen Dixon says Pakistan said that regional plebiscite was a departure from the principle of single plebiscite. In the same paragraph of his report to the United Nations, Owen Dixon has recorded, however, I'm given the impression that Pakistan is willing to accept a partition of the state, provided it got the valley, and it got the valley without a vote. Now, this was significant. Pakistan was willing to make a departure from the principle of single plebiscite, provided it got the value and it got it without a vote. So single plebiscite was simply an excuse. Now, the most telling episode is August 1953. On 8th August, Sheikh Abdullah was sacked. Sheikh Abdullah was then the Prime Minister of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, this is before the constitution was adopted and the designation.
And we still had prime ministers.
And he was arrested. So technically, there are pro-Pakistani writers who have spun a story that, India or Nehru developed cold feet because India lost the Abdullah card. Pakistan proposed bilateral talks. Pakistani Prime Minister Bogra came to Delhi. Bogra-Nehru talks took place, and at the end of the talks, a joint communique was issued. This is all in public domain.
Mm.
The two sides agreed to plebiscite. Bogra went back to Pakistan. 3 months later, on 1st December 1953, he wrote to Indian Prime Minister Pandit Nehru, rejecting the plebiscite. Why? The same ground that regional plebiscite was a departure from the principle of single plebiscite. Now, as I have mentioned to you earlier, they were willing to abandon this principle in 1950, provided they got the valley without a vote. So this was simply an excuse. So with this, Pakistan had killed the third and the last occasion when a formal proposal was made. Nehru closed the file 4 months later. In April 1954, he said that now that Pakistan has joined the Western military alliance, so situation has changed. But by that time, the idea was dead because you cannot hold plebiscite unilaterally. It's a bilateral affair, and Pakistan had killed it officially on 1st December 1953. Now, let me very briefly touch on the reason why Pakistan was repeatedly rejecting what became its official position subsequently and has remained till today. The reason was there was a full-fledged military operation going on in POK. Now, this is something which very few people know. In April 1950, first president of POK, Sardar Ibrahim, was dismissed by Pakistan. This triggered a revolt by Ibrahim's tribe, and then first the Punjab Constabulary was deployed, and then Pakistan Army was deployed to crush the revolt, which had spread all over Pakistan occupied.
This is the Southern revolt that you mentioned in your book.
This is a Southern revolt.
Yeah.
Now, 1950, and this lasted for almost a decade. It started in 1950. In 1955, this is 5 years later, Muslim Conference, which was a major political organization of the region, presented a memorandum to Pakistan Constituent Assembly. And in this memorandum, Muslim Conference complained of terrorization, of mass arrest, detention. They have used the memorandum used the word concentration camps. That is, people of POK were kept in concentration camps.
Let me just ask you one question. What was Muslim Conference? Because I have a lot of people who are joining this for the first time and they may not be aware. What was Muslim Conference? It was a political party of Jammu and Kashmir.
Muslim Conference was a political party which had some presence in the western part of the state. They had no presence in the Kashmir Valley, where the main political force was National Conference, of Sheikh Abdullah, which had opted for India. Muslim Conference opted for Pakistan, and its leader was a man called Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas. Sardar Ibrahim also belonged to Muslim Conference. So this was a pro-Pakistan party, and here it was a pro-Pakistan party, which had submitted this memorandum to Pakistan Constituent Assembly, complaining of mass terror, arrest, detention. Then it has given graphic details of rape of women, their private parts being, groped by Pakistan Army or Punjab Constabulary Police on the suspicion that they were hiding bombs and so on. Young boys subjected to unnatural vices. They have given the platoon numbers of Pakistani forces. And then it added mortars, which is a heavy caliber gun, were used against the civilian population. Terrorized by this situation, the memorandum concluded 3,000 people of POK, these were good Muslims, who crossed over to the Indian side of the border. Now, this memorandum was presented to UN Security Council in 1957 by Krishna Menon, India's foreign minister. It was in public domain at the time. Pakistani foreign minister Srivastava Khan, who was a very voluble person, he was present. He didn't object. So obviously it was, it was an established fact. And UN accepted the memorandum, which was circulated as a UN document. Now, thereafter, something very curious happened. UN document, by definition, UN documents are public documents. Then somebody decided to classify it for reasons which we can only guess. The only beneficiary was Pakistan, and the document disappeared from public gaze. On my request, UN has declassified this document, and it is available on the UN's website. So this was the reason. If there was a military operation of this scale, where the heavy caliber guns were being used by the Pakistan Army against the civilian population, and the women were raped en masse, and 3,000 people crossed over to the Indian side. This was the reason why Pakistan didn't want to
do a plebiscite.
Which
this is a stunning revelation that you are saying. What you are saying is that Pakistan rejected the offer of plebiscite because they were doing a military operation on the side of Pakistan that they were illegally holding. And the reason could be that Pakistan, even the Pakistan that they were holding at that time and currently hold, may not have voted for Pakistan at that time because the public sentiment was totally against them, even in POK. So it might have lost even the Pakistan that it was, even the Kashmir that it was illegally holding. Is that what scared them?
Exactly. Pakistan was not sure of the outcome of the vote, even on its side of the...
Exactly.
Which was then called ceasefire line. Let me add one more point. This is, the UN resolution, UN's Commission for India and Pakistan. This was a commission appointed by United Nations. They adopted a resolution in August 1948. The resolution has three parts, ceasefire, part 1, withdrawal, complete withdrawal of all Pakistani forces or forces under Pakistani control from the area illegally occupied by it. This is the second part. And of course, there was a related obligation for India, which called on India to withdraw bulk of its forces. So there's a distinction here. Pakistan was asked to withdraw all its forces. India was asked to withdraw only bulk of its forces and maintain some forces to assist the state government to preserve law and order. Yeah. Now, the third part was plebiscite. Now, the sequence clearly means that holding a plebiscite was contingent upon prior performance of its obligations by Pakistan, which was to withdraw all its forces. Now, this has remained a major stumbling block for Pakistan, because Pakistan does not want to let go of the territory illegally grabbed by. Now, very interestingly, and this is again based on UN records, which are in public domain. In his first official reaction to the UN's CIP resolution of August 1948, which was accepted by both sides, by India and by Pakistan. But in his first reaction, the Pakistani Foreign Minister, Srivastava Khan, he wrote what was the need for this elaborate resolution you could have just stopped short at part 1, that is ceasefire.
Yeah.
What is the inference? Pakistan was willing to sacrifice plebiscite for the sake of retaining control of the territory illegally occupied by it, because plebiscite was part 3.
Yeah.
But before you reach part 3, you have to withdraw your forces, which Pakistan didn't want to.
Yeah.
So from the beginning, there has been, the plebiscite is simply, for public consumption.
Exactly. It's a euphemism. They never wanted to do it. You have given us a very good sense of what was happening on the Pakistani side between Jinnah and Mountbatten, because we talk so much, we talk ad nauseum. Even now, we are constantly discussing what happened on the Indian side in 1947. But somehow we never know what happened on the Pakistani side, what they were doing. So you've given us a very good sense of what they were doing around that time, and the kind of nefarious activities that they were up to. There is also another agreement that on Indian side and in global community no one knows about. In fact, I didn't know about it till I read about it in your book, which is the Karachi Agreement. What is that Karachi Agreement that allows Pakistan to hold on to its side of Kashmir illegally? And
The
why was
so
it never known? Why was it never in public domain?
No, okay, I'll come to that. Now, you see, let me just clarify. There are 2 Karachi agreements. One is the Karachi agreement, is the ceasefire line,
Okay.
which was which went into effect on 1st January 1949. This is a different Karachi agreement. This was also signed in 1949, but it was kept secret till it came to light in a historic judgment of POK High Court. POK High Court said that this was an illegal agreement. And what was the agreement? Who signed it? The agreement was signed on one hand by Pakistan, on the other hand by representatives of so-called Azad Kashmir or POK. On behalf of POK, it was signed by Sardar Ibrahim Khan, the then president, and Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas, the chairman of the Muslim Conference. On behalf of Pakistan, it was signed by Nawab Ghurmani, the Pakistani Minister for Kashmir Affairs. The agreement ceded control of northern areas, which is 85% of the territory occupied by Pakistan, to Pakistan. Now, this was change of territorial status quo by Pakistan without plebiscite. So this was a violation of the UN Security Council resolution, and that is why it was kept secret, not only from India, not only from United Nations, but even from the people of Pakistan and Jammu and Kashmir. Now, in 1993, some of the POK leaders who knew about it, in fact, all the political parties together filed a case in POK High Court for return of this territory, and the High Court said this was a violation of the UN Security Council resolutions in so many words by Pakistan, which Pakistan keeps, it keeps citing Security Council resolutions, but here the POK High Court was saying Pakistan had violated it and asked for return of the territory, which Pakistan has never done. Now, this is a version of truth. As there was a famous American comedy I saw some time back, and where the hero has been caught red-handed by his second wife, flirting with his third girlfriend. And, she confronts him, and the hero says that, this is a version of truth, and the course that truth, there's only one truth. There are no versions. But in Pakistan's narrative, there are versions of truth. So the Karachi Agreement is a version of truth which has come out since POK High Court's judgment of 93. Now, there are 2 caveats to it. Northern area was brought under Pakistan's direct control, not simply in 1949. It was brought under Pakistan's direct control in November 1947, immediately after
Let me just stop you because for the benefit of our audience, northern areas is what we now know as Gilgit-Baltistan on the top. It was in 1947. It was, of course, under Maharaja Hari Singh, who had ceded it to British, and then somehow it went to Pakistan, which was a total perfidy. How it went to Pakistan?
no, let me just interject.
Yes.
The Maharaja was forced to cede it in
Mm.
1932. Before independence, the British ceded control of this territory back to Maharaja
Mm.
because they were leasing, and this was a lease right. So the lease had, once the British were leaving the territory, the lease lapsed and the territory went back to Maharaja, and Maharaja appointed a governor.
Mm.
Now, on 1st November 1947, Gilgit Scouts, a British paramilitary force headed by a British officer called Major Brown,
Mm.
they raised the flag of revolt against Maharaja's, the governor appointed by Maharaja. And so then it slipped into Pakistani control. Major Brown invited Pakistan to send a representative, and that representative was a Tehsildar of Northwest Frontier Province, Muhammad Alam, who was appointed by Pakistan as its political agent, and he arrived there on 17th November to take control of the territory from Major Brown. Now, what this episode brings out is that this was no indigenous struggle. There's hardly any
Uprising.
example in the world
Mm.
where the representative of the colonial power leads the independence struggle. So it was Major Brown, serving officer of British Army, who raised the flag of revolt, and he has described this in his memoir, and he's titled the memoir "Coup d'etat" in Gilgit. So the description itself is telling.
Yeah.
So the interesting part is that 17th November, when Major Brown handed over control of the territory to Pakistan's political agent, by that time, Provisional Government of Azad Kashmir, or POK, had already been formed. It was formed, it was declared on 24th October according to the current version of truth which Pakistan has propagated. So this was 3 weeks into existence. Why was not this territory, which belonged to the state of Jammu and Kashmir, handed over to the provisional government of the so-called Azad Kashmir?
Yeah.
Why was it taken over directly by NWFP? NWFP was part of Pakistan. So Pakistan assumed direct control of this territory in 1947 itself.
Yeah.
Now, the second caveat to this version of truth, Karachi Agreement, it had, two signatories from the Kashmiri side, Sardar Ibrahim and Ghulam Abbas. Sardar Ibrahim he had a very interesting history. He became president of so-called Azad Kashmir 4 times.
Mm.
Now, in his later life, he kept on saying, मैंने जिंदगी में और भी गलतियां की, ये गलती नहीं की है. I have committed other mistakes in my life, but I have not committed this mistake.
Which is signing the agreement.
He denied ever having signed so-called agreement. So to begin with, Karachi Agreement was a forged document. Now, interestingly, Chaudhry Abbas, the other Kashmiri signatory, he also said something similar. He said that he said he signed it, but he said he signed it as party president. So he distanced himself from territorial change, which he was beyond the, he coyly, implied that it was beyond his control.
Yeah.
So that both the signatories, Kashmiri signatories of this document, have distanced themselves from
the Karachi agreement.
So history itself is in doubt.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's interesting that it was just kept so secret. I read about it in your book, in fact, and there is a very cheeky statement that you say in your book. You said that, and I actually burst out laughing. You said Mountbatten was, he wanted to decide Kashmir on the wishes of the people, and that was funny coming from a colonial power, because they had been in India for 200 years and nobody had asked Indians whether Indians wanted British to be in India at that point, but somehow they wanted Kashmir to be decided on the wishes of the people. So it was a pretty cheeky comment. Coming back to this whole narrative game about Kashmir and POK, Pakistan's entire narrative in Kashmir has been that they are only assisting people of Kashmir for this self determination. And people are fighting. It's the indigenous Azadi movement. And all we hear is, Hum Kya Chahte Azadi narrative that has been going on in 75 years, and 75 years is a good amount of time to decide this. In 75 years, how much azadi has Pakistan given to the areas that it has under its control as of now? What do you think? I think people of Kashmir need to understand how much azadi is on the other side.
It's a very significant question.
Yeah.
Under Article 472 of POK's Interim Constitutional Act of 1974, it remains in existence.
Mm.
And this is one of the most important articles of that so-called constitution.
Mm.
It says that no individual or party is allowed to question the ideology of Kashmir's of accession to Pakistan. So accession to Pakistan is a predetermined conclusion. They have no choice to either join India or to remain independent. So Azadi is only freedom to join Pakistan. This is not simply a constitutional provision.
Mm.
This has actually governed the conduct of elections. Each election party and each candidate, before he's allowed to run, has to sign a declaration accepting this provision. Now, conversely, those parties which have independence, which are willing, which are committed to independence option, are not allowed to participate at all in elections. So its interesting result is Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front, JKLF. This is, on the Indian side of the border, the most well-known face is Yasin Malik, who was responsible for murder of Air Force officers.
Yes.
And he started the so-called Intifada or uprising in Kashmir on the slogan Azadi.
Yeah.
His mentor, the founding member, was
Amanullah Khan.
of JKLF, Amanullah Khan.
Yeah.
He and his party were never allowed to take part in elections in Pakistan.
Wow.
Because they espouse independence option. So Azadi is only for people on the Indian side of the Jammu and Kashmir. On the Pakistani side, this option is frowned upon and it is legally banned.
Yeah. So coming back to this Azadi thing, there is also, in 1990, Pakistan started a full-fledged uprising, assisted a full-fledged uprising in Kashmir, in Indian side of Kashmir. And we know that all these terrorist camps, they were all in POK. Somehow they were all, under Zia and under Operation Topak. We know that all these, terror groups and these training camps, they were all in POK. Somehow POK and Gilgit-Baltistan became a vast springboard for launching terror groups. Was this not a violation of their rights and their territory? And how did Pakistan manage to do that? And still does it?
Pakistan has used Gilgit-Baltistan or northern areas as essentially no man's land. to base these terror training camps. But let me first answer why it all erupted, when it erupted. There are commentators who blame it on the election irregularities in 1987 on the Indian side. But it really erupted in 89. Why the time gap? Because in 1988, Geneva Accords were signed. The Soviet troops withdrew by the end of 88, and that allowed Pakistan to divert battle-hardened jihadis from Afghanistan to fight Kashmir. They have used this territory, POK and northern areas, to train to station to maintain the training camps in order to maintain deniability. And this, in contemporary period, this is after 9/11. There was this famous Wall Street Journal journalist who was killed.
Daniel Pearl.
Sorry?
Daniel Pearl?
Daniel Pearl.
Yeah.
Daniel Pearl, in 2 pieces written for Wall Street Journal, reported from Karachi that while Musharraf has said that Pakistan's soil will not be allowed to be used to undertake terrorist actions against any country, the offices of Jaish-e-Mohammed, which were in Bahawalpur, they are open. Their bank accounts are open, and simply that the terrorists and the training camps are they have been relocated in POK, and it was no coincidence that soon thereafter, unfortunately, Daniel Pearl was assassinated. And incidentally, the man who assassinated him, who was Azad Shah. Azad Shah was, Azad Shah, who was the mastermind behind assassination of Daniel Pearl. He was interior minister in Punjab, but wait, he became more important later. He became interior minister in Imran Khan's cabinet.
Wow.
The cabinet, in the first half, and when the story came out, he was eventually shifted. So this is how Pakistan has conducted the war on terror, which it self-righteously claims has cost it.
They also claim to be victims. They also claim to be victims of from Musharraf to even Shehbaz Sharif. He just made a statement that they are victims of a war on terror, or they are victims of terrorism. So this kind of perfidy, as Madeleine Albright said, that Pakistan is
they are victims of terrorism spawned by them, and this was expressed by Hillary Clinton, Madam Hillary Clinton, as US Secretary of State on a visit to Pakistan is sometime before 9/11, and she raised this question: it's not conceivable that no one in this country knows the whereabouts of Osama bin Laden. And then she made the statement, and this should be available in public domain.
Yeah, I remember.
Snakes in your
backyard.
You bite your neighbor, sometimes they bite you also.
Yeah, she clearly said you cannot raise snakes in your backyard and then not expect them to bite you as well. Yeah, absolutely. After 2019, after abrogation of Article 370, there has been constant barrage from international community as well as the political parties in the valley, only in the valley, who say that this is all done because they want to change. India wants to change the demographics of Jammu and Kashmir. It's been 2 years, 3 years now since 2019. We haven't seen much change of demographics, but in the context of recent delimitation exercise that has happened in Jammu and Kashmir in India, there has been complete criticism of the Indian government. Has Pakistan preserved the demographic composition of POK? How is the state subject defined in POK's constitution?
POK's constitution has an interesting article which says that a state subject is defined as somebody who's for the time being, mark the words, living in either Azad Kashmir or Pakistan. And it then goes on to say and it makes a reference to Maharaja's notification of who is defined as a state subject under Maharaja's notification of 1927, as amended from time to time. Now, Maharaja had amended this notification only once. So, who, when was it subsequently amended and who amended it? But the basic, the ambiguity comes from this definition that a state subject is a person who, for the time being, is living either in Azad Kashmir or Pakistan. Now, the second part, this constitution was adopted in 1974. In 72 or 73, if I remember, this is before the constitution, the Pakistan Citizenship Act was extended to POK and northern areas, which is now called Gilgit-Baltistan. So, the citizens of POK were made citizens of Pakistan, not by their choice, but by a law enacted by Pakistani National Assembly. You see the contrast. In case of India, J&K Constitution was adopted by J&K Assembly in 1957. Here, the Pakistan Citizenship Act is extended to POK and Gilgit-Baltistan, and who's adopted the Citizenship Act? It's the Pakistan National Assembly.
Wow. So somehow this stuff never comes out in open. Somehow this stuff, it is never talked about. I don't understand what is it about Pakistan that they just get a free pass everywhere. Talking about Kashmiri.
Let me add one more thing.
Yeah.
On the citizenship issue, you see the presently you look at, you don't have to, you just have a look at the YouTube or see the speeches in Pakistan, in the POK Assembly or Gilgit-Baltistan Assembly. I was shocked to see people, with wheatish complexion or dark complexion. Kashmiri are all there. So who are these people? This is, the unchecked influx from outside, from rest of Pakistan.
Yeah.
Incidentally, biggest influx or change in demographic composition took place when the Mangla Dam was constructed in 60s. It was completed in 67, which led to displacement of Mirpuris, who are now a sizable constituency in England. And POK, under POK's laws, they have reserved 6 seats for people from Kashmir Valley and 6 seats for people from Jammu region. That is 12 seats are reserved. Now, interesting part is the total number of refugees is 436,000. Of that, the number of Kashmiri refugees is only 30,000. Now, POK's total population is more than 3 million. So that means the Kashmiris, by definition, according to Pakistani official figures, are less than 1% of the population of POK, though Pakistan claims to appropriate the POK cause.
Ambassador, you served in Pakistan. You were there. I want to ask you, during your tenure, did you get a sense that ordinary Pakistani also believes that Kashmir is part of unfinished business of partition, and the usual thing that Kashmir is, what they say from Bhutto onwards, they've been saying Kashmir hamara shahrag hai, Kashmir is the jugular vein of Pakistan. Do the ordinary Pakistanis also believe that? That is number one. And do the ordinary Pakistanis, since you were in Pakistan, do they know of Pakistan's atrocities in POK? Or and they don't care, or they don't even know it has been kept completely, they've been kept completely away from there as well?
What I heard in informal discussions, my friends in Karachi, and this is, across the board, all political parties and, both Sindhis, Muhajirs, they all said Kashmir is a Punjabi cause. Punjab is 60% of Pakistan's population. It is 90% of Pakistan's army. It is 100% of ISI. So what is called Kashmir cause is actually something which has been appropriated by Punjab. They will not say that in all Pakistani leaders in official statements. They maintain the official position that this is an unfinished agenda, partition, and so on and so forth. But you go back to 1972 debate in Pakistan National Assembly, and two of the key opposition leaders, Wali Khan and Bizenjo, who was later became Balochistan chief minister, both of them pointed out that Pakistan needs to move ahead. And Bizenjo made the point in what way the lives of, he referred to the then population figures. He said, in what way the lives of 5 million Kashmiris is more important than the lives of 50 million Muslims in rest of India.
Yeah.
And this was a very pertinent question. Now, of course, the population has doubled. The Kashmiris are on the Indian side, they are about 10 million. And the Muslim population in India is also above 100 million or so. But this remains a major issue.
Yeah. China has been made, Pakistan made China a party in so-called Kashmir issue because it ceded territory to China, which was illegal. Pakistan didn't own the territory, so it shouldn't have ceded, but they ceded the territory to China. Now with China in the picture and with CPEC happening, what do you see the future of POK? Because now China is with the rise of China and Pakistan completely being a colony of China as we know now. What is the future of POK and Gilgit-Baltistan?
China has invested more than or offered credit and loan. They don't really invest in Pakistan or in any other. These are loans on very harsh terms. But they have provided financing. Let me put it this way: for $16 billion for projects in POK and Gilgit-Baltistan. This is much more than the financing for projects anywhere else. Gwadar, for instance, is only $900 million. Now, of this figure of $16 billion, $12 billion are committed to Diamond Basha Dam in Gilgit-Baltistan. They are investing heavily in the hydroelectric projects in this area. Now, this will change. This will affect the delicate ecological balance of the region. And this may have consequences. You have seen the massive floods in Pakistan recently. This will also change the ethnic balance because Gilgit-Baltistan or northern area is the only area under Pakistani control where Shias are in a majority. So construction work on such a major scale will bring in an influx of outsiders, which has already happened during the construction of Karakoram Highway, but this process will get accentuated. Now, so there will be internal changes, and if China has made such heavy investment, it's obviously not going to go away. So it is trying to strengthen its presence on the western flank of the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir. It's already presence in East Ladakh. Now it's also trying to strengthen its presence on the western side. And one outcome of this will be, because the Chinese credit carries very stiff, interest rates, and Pakistan has committed 17% return in dollar terms on Chinese financing, which is extremely high.
Yeah.
Now, this kind of return is only possible by keeping the by keeping the power tariff high.
Yeah.
So this is going to actually worsen Pakistan's economic situation.
Yeah, absolutely. We've almost reached the end of this wonderful session. I forgot to ask one question, and that was a very important question. The most important natural resource of this area, Gilgit-Baltistan and POK, is water. So has POK and Gilgit-Baltistan, have they received fair compensation for the water resources they have? And then we are also getting some audience questions, and we will move on to audience questions after that. But I wanted to ask about the water resources and the compensation for that.
You have raised a very important question. Mangla Dam was constructed in 1967. For
Mhm.
36 years thereafter, POK did not get any remuneration or payment for its water or electricity generated from Mangla Dam. When the payments began in 2003, the payments were restricted to 15 paisa per unit as water usage charge. Provinces in Pakistan, that is Punjab and Northwest Frontier Province, which is now called Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, they are paid 1 rupee 10 paisa per unit, more than 7 times as much as what is paid to POK. Now, the difference in classification, water usage charge and hydropower royalty wouldn't have mattered if the amount was the same.
Yeah.
But the amount is so different. Now, how is it justified? Pakistan says that under Pakistani constitution, hydroelectric hydropower royalty is only payable to Pakistan's provinces, and Azad Kashmir, and for that matter, Gilgit-Baltistan are not part of Pakistan under Pakistan's constitution. Very reasonable argument, except that in international law, you pay for goods and services which you buy from outside your legal jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So even if they are not part of Pakistan's territory, Pakistan should have paid for it.
Yeah.
And their distinct status did not come in the way of exploiting POK's resources. It became an issue only when it came to making payments for it.
Yeah.
And the last point, there have been 26 amendments of POK's constitution since it was adopted in 74. 26 amendments of Pakistan's constitution
Mm.
since 1973. This provision was left untouched. Now, this cannot be simply a coincidence.
Yeah.
Everything else has changed.
Yeah, absolutely. I have this one last question, and it's personally, it bothers me a lot, and I thought I might ask you, and then we will move on to audience questions. Our ambassadors and our diplomatic staff, they do a wonderful job in international fora, like you've done, and you've thwarted all these nefarious designs of Pakistan multiple times, and we've been successful. However, why have we not been able to change the general popular narrative? Because you will also agree, whatever happens in UN, whatever happens in the US Congress, whatever happens between the governments, it generally does not transpire. There's a lag between that and the public narrative and the public perception. What is it about Pakistan that even as an aggressor and even as having done forged documents and changed the demography and done all kinds of illegal things in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, yet their narrative seems to be in the popular world. I mean, it's changing now, but not as much. For the longest time, their narrative seemed to hold. Vikram Sood was here, Mr. Vikram Sood, former head of RAW, and I asked him this question, not the exact question, but the same question about what is it about Pakistan that they can manage to ram in their narrative. And he said, well, because India was on the wrong side of Cold War. What is your opinion about it? Why is it that we're not able to change the global narrative?
I think Mr. Vikram Sood is right, but even before the Cold War, and there's it was the legacy of the British presence in the subcontinent.
Yeah.
The British were kicked out by Indian National Congress. The Muslim League were the collaborators, and therefore the British version of subcontinental history always has a slant, and especially on Kashmir issue. This is right from the beginning. This got reinforced during the Cold War because India was non-aligned and Pakistan was the good boy who was aligned on the right side. It's another matter that at the height of the Cold War, while it was drawing heavy amounts of financial and military assistance from USA, it signed an agreement with China in 1963. This is right of the Cold War, when America's relations with China were very strained. So Pakistan has, flirted on both sides of the street, but the overall, they were beneficiaries of this overall sense that they are our boys.
Yeah.
The third stage was, the Afghan jihad, and again Pakistan was, found to be on the right side, and India was again, slightly distant. But this is changing, and there is now fair amount of literature available in international fora from Western sources. I can just cite a few. C. Christine Fair. She's a professor in
Georgetown.
She has written a number of books. Let me just mention, the Pakistan Army's way of fighting. When she has detailed the Pakistan Army's involvement in terrorism activities, both in Afghanistan and Jammu and Kashmir. Human Rights Watch, which is based in New York, has brought out an excellent report with friends like these. This was, based on-site visit after the earthquake in 2005, and there's a very interesting interview of Amanullah Khan, who raised the slogan of Azadi, and he was pleading with Human Rights Watch not to leave them alone, because he said once this rush of NGOs is over after the earthquake, the Iron Curtain will descend again. And he said that he gave graphic description of how his party members were beaten up, tortured, refused participation in elections on every occasion possible. So there are Steve Cole, Daniel Pearl. These are all. Cole was a Washington Post correspondent. He's written a book called Ghost Wars, and post Afghan war and recent withdrawal. Now, of course, there's a growing realization about Pakistan's complicity. I think Admiral Macmillan, in testimony to U.S. Congress, has described Haqqani Network, which is a dominant faction in the Taliban regime in Kabul now. And he described Haqqani Network as a veritable arm of the ISI.
Absolutely. Things are changing, and we hope your book is an important addition to this literature that has come from West, from India. Unfortunately, we haven't spent much time, but your book fills the gap. So really, congratulations for this wonderful research that you have done. I will now quickly go to the audience questions. There is one question. I might be able to take one or two. Post the decisions of August 5th, 2019, there has been a narrative on and off about Indian state bringing demographic change in Kashmir. Even jihadi outfits in their threat letters talk about this. Is there a narrative gap in this case? Because the actual demographic change has been the continual genocide of indigenous Kashmiri Pandits, and if at all they are given their share in Kashmir, wouldn't that be demographic correction and not merely a demographic change? Given that Kashmir by force has today largely become a homogeneous society.
You are right. The Kashmiri Pandits forced migration in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
This was a ethnic cleansing, and the phenomenon continues. It's unfortunate that attempts to bring them back and have triggered a fresh.
Wave of violence. Yeah.
So I think the narrative is entirely one-sided. There is no influx from outside. Those people who were there have been forced out, and they remain.
Yeah,
There
absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
this lady teacher in Kashmir, Jammu Kashmir last year. This
Yeah.
was a deliberate message that she was Pandit, and if you're Pandit, you're not welcome.
Not just that, after that, there have been many more targeted attacks. Rahul Bhatt, he was a PM package employee. He was shot dead in his office. So clearly, they've been sending messages that, we are not going to allow any indigenous Kashmiri Pandits to come back. So when they were forced out, as you call it, forced migration, I call it continual genocide, as part of continual genocide, when they were forced out in the modern times, let's not even look at the older times, but even in modern times, post 1990, that was a demographic change right there. So a demographic change already happened. And last question. Can there be a non-military modus operandi to take back the control of illegally occupied POK? Does the Chinese factor give extra leverage to Pakistan in maintaining their illegal occupation? I don't know what non-military modus operandi. Is there a non-military modus operandi possible?
If there's an implosion in Pakistan, but I would certainly not recommend the military option.
Okay.
India actually accepted in Shimla Agreement maintaining the territorial status quo, which committed both sides to renounce use of force to change the status quo. This was 3 years before the Helsinki Agreement in Europe,
Yeah.
where the European countries renounced use of force to change the borders. And India was ahead of its time. And
Yeah.
this remains a very valid proposition, especially considering what is happening in Europe right now. I'll certainly not advocate a military option. A non-military option, this is for the people of the region to decide, and people of Pakistan. I've lived in Karachi, and that was in the 90s, early 90s, when the first military operation against Muhajirs were launched. Pakistan military, and it was such an irony that Muhajirs who gave birth to Pakistan, the idea of Pakistan did not come from Muslim majority states, it came from Muslim minority states of North India. And it was Muhajirs who created it. 40 years later, they were being dubbed as,
Outsiders.
outsiders. They are still called Muhajirs.
Muhajirs, Urdu speaking.
They have
Yeah.
then been subjected to 4 military operations. So, it's Pakistan's internal dynamics which needs to be watched. And we wish them well. We certainly don't want instability on our borders, but this is something which goes back to the choices made by Pakistani leaders and Pakistan Army.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I would like to tell our viewers that here's the book, Forgotten Kashmir, The Other Side of the Line of Control. I would like to tell everyone who has joined us, we have only touched about 2% of what is in this book. This book is a gold mine, if I would use that word, of information, and it is very useful for practitioners of foreign policy, for journalists, for people who are into writing about India, Pakistan, columnists, but even beyond that, for the people, for generally people who try to understand, who become victims of this machinations by Pakistan, people of Jammu and Kashmir, people everywhere who have become victim of the narratives. They need to read this book. You need to read this book. So right after this show, go ahead and order Forgotten Kashmir, The Other Side of Line of Control. It will totally change your viewpoint, your how you think about Kashmir. Thank you so much, Ambassador Srivastava, for joining us on Epicenter today. We intend to continue this conversation, so maybe soon we'll have you over again. I hope you enjoyed as much as we did.
Thanks for having me. Let me just mention the book is available on Amazon as well as Kindle. Thank you.
Absolutely. The book is available on Amazon and Kindle, so please order the book and let's keep the conversation going. Thank you so much, Master. So,
and I must thank HarperCollins for bringing out the book.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks to HarperCollins, because such things they took the. I think it was pretty courageous of them, because the book does have a lot of explosive stuff. So thank you so much. I have to do. My team often gets upset with me because I get so carried on with conversations and with the issues of the day that I forget to tell you the most important thing. If you enjoy what we are doing on Epicenter, if you enjoy the elephant in the room conversations that we have here, if you would like to see most of it, then the first thing that you need to do is you need to subscribe to Epilogue News Network on YouTube and follow us there. And please, on other platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, subscribe to us, follow us there. That is how we know that you're really interested in what we're doing. And we get the feedback from you as well. So keep the feedback going. Let us know what you would like to hear or what you would like us to talk about. The most important part of Epicenter is that we talk with the experts. So we're not going to have these conversations where we're just throwing rhetoric at you. So we are going to have these informed discussions about what I say legacy media has no time for and has no interest in. So thank you for joining us today. I will be back next time. Be well, keep reading. And this is Sunanda Vashisht signing off. Thank you.